Welcome to the Amner Martinez podcast, a Des Moines, Iowa local-centric podcast. Since 2019, I've had the privilege and honor to speak with local politicians, chefs, musicians, athletes, authors, and more. In the 2025 season, we want you to walk away from this podcast knowing our local people in a different light and seeing them from different angles than you're used to. So stick around for interesting conversations. Christopher Johnson, I was doing my research, and this podcast is going to be exciting for lawyers, or if you want to become a lawyer, or even teachers that teach law. You're a lawyer.
Yes.
You are part of the Law Group of Iowa. At your place, you have the Law Museum of Iowa.
Yes.
And you wrote a book.
I did.
On Roswell.
Yes, the Roswell incident.
Yes. So I don't even know where to go. But first, like you've the fields of law that you practice are also very interesting. Like you do civil rights cases.
I do. I'll tell you a little. Do you want a little overview of my firm? And
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me know what.
All right. So by trade, I'm a personal injury attorney. So, and I've been practicing since 2001. I started it up in the Twin Cities and still have an office there. My partner, Chris Martineau, runs our Minneapolis office. And our real focus up there, and to a little bit lesser extent down here in Iowa, but we do a lot of trucking cases. So cases vary there, and they're always tragic, as you can imagine. You have a semi truck hitting a car, hitting a motorcycle, that kind of thing. So we do a lot of trucking work. And I should point out, semi-truck litigation is a completely different animal than motor vehicle, motorcycles, all that kind of thing. The truck cases, if anyone ever has an incident with a truck, of course I'd like them to contact me, but be sure the lawyer with whom you're speaking actually is a trucking attorney. They're handled very, very differently.
I saw a PBS documentary on trucking accidents, and what I got out of it is that they're deadly, but also that like the trucking industry is also not necessarily cooperating with making them safer, and so it is a very unique practice then, right?
Yes, it is, and again, there are a lot of lawyers that would say, well, certainly I can handle a trucking case. And, they probably could. But you have to look at what your end result is. And, I speak from experience. Prior to, say, 15 years ago, I hadn't handled an actual semi-truck case. And then I handled one. And I partnered up with an experienced trucking attorney for that one. And I thought, well, this is how you run these cases, and this is how, and boy, did he set me straight. So yeah, they're different. And if I were to show them any grace, I mean, the trucking industry, it's a tough business, and the vast majority of the companies are trying to do right. They're trying to be safe. Face it, there's so many trucks on the road, and you get a rogue driver or somebody who just wants to quick get a load to where it needs to be. Things that all of us
we want to get our job done.
Yeah, we're running a little bit late to work, and we run a yellow. That. So it's never a nefarious type of thing. But that's negligence. We tend not to use the word accidents. It's somebody was negligent, and that's not saying they're bad or anything like that. It's simply what happens, and you have to pay attention and not be negligent. So the truck cases, we actually represent people all over the United States on cases like that. Between me and my partner and our associate, we're licensed in 7 or 8 states, but the reality is there's a process most people aren't familiar with. That, let's say I get a call from Nevada, and I'm not licensed in Nevada. There's a very simple process, all 50 states. I just contact a Nevada licensed attorney. I fill out a document, and I'm then licensed in Nevada for that one case.
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
So no one should ever be put off by, oh, well, they're here or they're everywhere.
Okay,
yeah, we work all over the country.
So it's not the same then, like that you have to have like a bar exam passed in that state then is this just specifically to trucking?
No, that's for any, like, good question. So no, the Latin phrase is pro hoc vice.
Okay.
Don't ask me specifically what that means.
Okay.
But it's the process that we can use to get admitted for a case.
A case. Okay.
Yeah. Typically, for what's called reciprocity. So the first state I was licensed in was Minnesota. Okay. And then when I got licensed in Iowa, you don't have to take the bar exam again. There's different requirements and certificates of good standing, that kind of thing. But you don't. There could be some states out there that make you take the bar. I don't know. But typically you take the bar in the state in which you graduate and then get licensed. Then you can get waived in to different jurisdictions. So that's how that goes.
And so I had the pleasure to meeting you. I think we met like maybe 2 years ago, it feels like.
Yeah.
Or at least 2023 probably. And you gave me a tour of your office, and you have a museum.
Yes.
There with like historical. So you're very passionate about about law.
I am. I am passionate about the law and what we do, and unfortunately, I think just generally speaking, civics. Right? It's just some people don't seem to pay attention to civics. It doesn't seem to. I've got some adult kids. And not a one of them really came home from school with, well, today we had civics and we're learning this and that. And when you take a look at what's going on in our country right now, the judiciary is incredibly important. It's an equal branch of our government.
Right.
And it's being, we're hearing things like, well, just ignore the court order. To my estimation, that is the beginning of the end. You want to start ignoring judge, whether you like what they say or not.
Right.
We have to have some semblance of direction in our country, and I think a lot of that stems from the judiciary. So yes, I'm very passionate about it. I also get it's really dry, and most people don't get too fired up talking about judges and whatnot. So my approach, as you mentioned, my law museum, right? So my offices that we met at here in Des Moines is called the Law Group of Iowa, and we're actually on Hickman Road over in Windsor Heights. And in that law office, as you saw, I built out a courtroom.
Yeah.
So we have a full 1,200 square foot courtroom, and we have overflow deliberation rooms that also resulted in a lot of wall space.
I see. Yes.
So that's where I started thinking, well, boy,
gotta fill up these walls.
Got to fill up these walls, right? And so I started out initially just focused on Iowa courts and just keeping it on point, to have an educational bent to it if anyone were so inclined to want to come over and learn. So I have one room entirely devoted to the Polk County Courthouse. The current one sitting here is the third one. A lot of people know it's at least the second. It's actually the third. And I have, in my Polk County room, I have pieces that the Polk County Courthouse doesn't even have. So it's really interesting. The history, even if you're not that into courthouses, it shows a lot about the history of Des Moines and the history of the state. So I went real heavy on Polk County. I also have, and I think you saw a picture of this, Amner. I have a mural that I had done. I found two young ladies that are art students at Valley High School, and they freehanded, it's unbelievable, about an 8-foot by 9-foot state of Iowa.
I didn't see that.
Right. Okay. You got to come back over. So they freehanded the state of Iowa, including the county lines.
Oh, wow.
I then procured pieces of all 99 counties courthouses. Whether it's a piece of memorabilia, a piece of old architecture, a piece of something representative of that particular county's courthouse. And then over the mural, I have clear shelving, and it's labeled by county seat and county. And all the courthouses are up. It's called Iowa's Amazing Courthouses.
I definitely gotta go back.
It's really
so. Is that
interesting.
open? So how do you like that space to be used? Like schools can reach out to you, or do you? Like, how do you guys make use of it?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It is open to the public for free use.
Okay.
I really, a little bit more about me. Before I went to law school, I managed hotels.
Okay.
So I am very much a hospitality guy from way back. And so I have in the courtroom, by the way, I have 125 banquet chairs, so I can set the room up any way people need it. I would say just go to lawgroupofiowa.com, give me a call, and if it's available on whatever given day, I'll make the arrangements.
It's literally, you feel like you're in a courtroom because it's like the judge's seat, the witness seat, or and then...
And the jury chairs.
Right.
Yeah, it is... It's very, you've been there. It's extremely realistic. The judge's bench is a custom built three judge panel. And so if community groups are going to use it, they should know that because I designed it, instead of just having the one judge bench, I designed it what's called a 3-judge bench. So it's a lot longer. So it can be used for, just making this up, but the city council, right? Because there's enough space for it.
So is there, well, I know that the Supreme Court, like they all sit when they hear, but can you educate me a little bit on that? So like, I thought it was just one judge. Is there some cases that can have 3 judges at the same time? Or?
Yes, great question. So typically, if I was heading down to the courthouse today to argue a motion or what have you, just be one judge sitting up there. When you get to the appellate level court, so the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court, depending on what state you're in and how they have it set up, then you run into, like oftentimes at the appellate level, 3 justices.
I see.
But you can ask for an entire grouping of them, which I believe is 8 in Iowa. And then the Supreme Court of Iowa, as you mentioned, I just argued in front of the Supreme Court successfully about 3 months ago. And that was a very interesting experience. A judge who's an appellate level, so Court of Appeals or Supreme Court, they're actually called justices. So sometimes you'll hear that used interchangeably, right? And it's always the Supreme Court.
I thought it was the same.
Nope.
No.
It's a little bit more distinction. So if you hear justice as a title, you know immediately it's an appellate level type of deal.
Okay.
But at the Supreme Court, it is kind of like when you see people testifying in front of Congress. You get up and you start...
They're justices.
They're justices, yep.
Okay.
You get up and you start doing your thing, and they just start interrupting you and asking you questions. And you're kind of on a roll, and they want to know what they want to know, so they'll ask you the questions. But so it's not stand and give a great narrative. It's you're up there and getting kind of hammered.
So a justice is a little bit higher than a judge then?
I suppose, and I've never, I don't know if it's more of a distinction, sort of an honor more so than what they can do. And sure, like in anything, kind of the higher level you go, the little bit more cachet that it has. But
do you still get nervous when you go up there, like and argue a case?
Not very often.
You've done it plenty of times.
Well, and that's just, I have a brand new young lawyer working for me. And I've been, she gets, I have this going on, and that, deer in the headlights, to the point that I'll be going to argue a motion or take a deposition, and I start thinking, am I missing something? Because I am not stressed at all. So that's not to say, jury trials are always a little bit nerve-wracking because they're, bringing in all the potential, and you're kind of on a show. But as far as the work that I do and the presentations or arguments that I have to make, I don't really get nervous.
Okay.
I think it's a testament of, this is my 24th, 25th year, and I've probably done it before in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, because like they got to sit up, right? Like the justices and judges, they're like a little bit higher than you. So
yeah, that's a great catch. When I didn't know that there's actually a formula on how high the judge's platform is supposed to be.
Oh, really?
So mine, when I built mine out, is I followed that, so it's very official. But yes, the judge is always supposed to be, his or her eyes are supposed to be the highest eyes in the courtroom. Okay, so the judge's platform is up, and then they base the height of the platform on a made-up 6-foot judge. So that's how they figure how high they're going to be. So yeah, there's an actual formula.
Okay. Why do you think that is? Just to like give them more authority? Like it's there's some psychological stuff involved in that, right?
Somebody's got to be in charge, and it's him or her, and so let's put them up a little bit higher, and give them that position. So you're the first one that I've ever heard make reference to that. But yeah, you're right.
And you built yours exactly to what
exactly as I could, but I had to contend with ceiling height as well. As in a courtroom, you got those way high ceilings. So
that's part of like your approach right now, right? You're like in a phase of your career that you're kind of giving back and sharing your knowledge and sharing your experience.
Yes, you're exactly right. I talked to my wife about that a lot. Again, not quite ready to retire, but I can kind of see it on the horizon and sort of looking at that, where do I want to be? What do I want to do, with law? And again, that was, with part of the courtroom and part of the, one of the things that we do is we host the state mock trial scrimmages. Okay. So the Iowa State Bar runs the actual tournaments themselves. So we decided, well, we want to get some kids in here and have them get excited about the law. So we put together our own scrimmages, and then we host it, pay for the pizzas and what have you, and all the kids come over for a couple of days. So
I remember I did for U.S. Heritage class in high school. We did the OK Corral
cool.
case. I don't remember who I played, but it was fun because like our teacher made us, there was some lawyers, and then there was the accused, and there was a judge and all that stuff, and that was just in his classroom, and it very memorable, right? So maybe a teacher can kind of hit you up and say, hey, I want to do something like that.
Well, thank you for the lead in, Amner. That's similar. So my book there, and we'll kind of come to that here in a moment. But yeah, you're exactly right on your experience you just mentioned. So my book that you have there, which is Roswell, The Truth on Trial. And just briefly for folks that aren't familiar, the Roswell incident occurred in 1947, just outside of Roswell, New Mexico. Something crashed. Something happened. Okay, so we can go that far. Now, what that something is, that's the $1 million question. So you had one group saying, well, it was certainly a crashed UFO with alien bodies in this giant cover-up. Okay? The other group saying, no, it was a weather balloon, and there's nothing to cover up. So what I did, kind of in the vein of your OK Corral story, I took the Roswell incident and I presented it in the form of a civil jury trial.
Oh, okay.
Right. So these historical mock trials. Now, on Roswell specifically, interesting thing about that book, the narrative of the story. So what happened and all that, the narrative is carried by testimony rather than paragraphs. It's actual back and forth between the lawyers and the witnesses telling the story. So you have your direct examination and then the cross exam. And so that's how the material is presented, leaving the reader, I don't necessarily, maybe I do, but I don't necessarily take a position because again,
there's like an attorney talks and then the other person talks, so it's like in a courtroom.
Correct. Yeah.
Was this like a real trial, or did you imagine this one?
I imagined this trial, right? So no trial ever happened. So me I'm a certified civil trial specialist. I try cases. I've done it a lot. So and I'm a UFO buff on the side. So I kind of took my two interests and I merged them there into the book.
Yeah, someone said the X-File meets Law and Order.
Right. Yeah. Yep. That review that I got. And it's pretty accurate. One thing that people should know about it, the testimony. So when one of the lawyers is crossing one of the military guys, for example, all of the testimony is from prior interviews given by those witnesses. So it's actual things they have said, to build the narrative. So there is a real element of reality.
So you've done, this is something that you're an expert in, like the Roswell case.
I think so.
You dove into it.
Yes. Yep. Very much so.
How long was this like in your brain before you said, okay, I got to write something?
I don't know if I should say this or not. 3 months. It's much to the chagrin of my wife and kids, I come up with a lot of ideas, a lot of big ideas. And if it's something I really like, I will think of it this morning and start it tonight and do nothing else until that's done.
I see.
And that book was one of those. So, again, the UFO interests and the space law, which we can talk a little bit about, that's been a lifelong thing. But specific to that book, it was a great idea that came to my mind, and I went to town.
Yeah, that day that we met, we talked the entire time. You gave me a whole tour of your place, the museum, and you told me about a few different other projects that you had. I don't think you mentioned the book at that time. It wasn't in your.
It was not even an idea.
So I am very not unfamiliar with Roswell. So this is in the 60s or what, 40s?
1947.
Okay, so can you go in a little bit more detail? Like something crashed.
Sure.
And the government said one thing, and other people said another thing.
Right. So in 1947, there was a rancher and went out to check his land like they do, and he found weird, undescribable materials, metals that you could crumple them up and they'd go back to flat, things he had never seen before. So he takes a piece and he goes and he talks to a neighbor, and she says, yeah, that's really weird. You should probably go talk to the sheriff. So he went and talked to the sheriff, and the sheriff called the Air Force because the base is right there. And within a matter of days, the Air Force was out there, had the entire area cordoned off, wouldn't let anybody on. They had trucks. They were picking through everything, and then trucks being loaded up with materials and taken from the scene, with then the military on the back end saying, "Oh no, it was a weather balloon that crashed." But boy, there was an awful lot of security and sneakiness going on, for a weather balloon.
Because if it was debris, it would have been like the local landscaping junk person to come and pick it up, right?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Exactly. It's just, so why did we have the military there, and why was it so locked down? We do know that the materials, whatever it was then taken to Fort Worth, Texas. And once it got to Fort Worth, that's when the story changed because when it was first found, it was announced in the newspapers that a disc had been recovered. And there's a picture of that newspaper in my book. And so they came right out and said, hey, we've got this disc. The materials got to Fort Worth, where there was more high-ranking military. They looked at it, and the next press release came out and said, oh, no. It wasn't a disc. It was a weather balloon. Nothing to see here. And that, here we are, 70 whatever years later, and the argument still rages on. So
nowadays, if you say that you believe that aliens are real, or that, you see a UFO, it's like normal, right? Like, it's starting to become like, yeah, people believe you. But before you were looked at as if you were crazy. Right.
And that leads to some of the issues and things like this, because if you read my book, so many of these people came out 30, 40 years later saying, oh, well, yeah, there was some hieroglyphics on it, for example. Why didn't you say that 40 years ago? They would have thought I was crazy 40 years ago. So it's kind of, well, it makes sense, but what's actually accurate and true. But yeah, I don't know the number offhand, but now it's a giant percentage of the population, the majority, believe that there's some sort of extraterrestrial
Even up until
life.
probably like the early 2000s or more, that it was like still, you
Taboo.
still look like you're crazy.
Yeah.
How unfair, right? Because like now, if you say that, people are like, for those people, I bet if they're still alive, they're like, I told you.
I've been saying this. Yeah, exactly. So, and on the Roswell stuff, so our listeners don't think I'm too out there, no pun intended. I also, most people aren't aware that this is a thing, but my firm, I'm also involved in various aspects of space law.
Okay, yes. Tell me about that.
Yeah, in space law, currently, most of the work in the world of space law is on what would be called the insurance side, the defense side of things. Now, I'm a plaintiff lawyer, usually, so I represent just individuals, who have been injured. But in the world of space law, currently, most of the work is with the insurance companies, the people that are actually insuring, your SpaceX's and your Blue Origins and things like that. For example, I'm just kind of making this up by way of example, a Blue Origin rocket explodes. They're insured by Lloyd's of London. They make a claim over to Lloyd's of London, who can then investigate it or pay it or not pay it or handle it how they see fit. So currently the role of the space lawyers are, for the most part, dealing with, okay, this claim has been made. I'm Lloyd's of London. Amner, you're a space law lawyer. Tell me what happened. Is this a valid claim? That sort of thing.
Okay.
So in the world of space law, I'm involved in some of that. I'm part of a team of lawyers with a firm actually out of Tampa, and they're actually a worldwide firm. So I work with them on some of these space law topics.
So these are like big companies that are dealing in litigation of who takes responsibility for the accident or whatever.
Right,
happened.
or your satellite crashed into my satellite.
I see.
Okay, whose satellite's fault was it? That kind of thing.
Okay.
Eventually,
I've never heard of space law.
Most people have not.
Yeah.
I have an old space law book, kind of the first textbook of space law.
Okay.
Is sort of the seminal book, was written in '63. And there were some before that, but really, as you can imagine now, with all the private space companies, it's really starting to become a growing area. At some point, as a typical plaintiff lawyer, I tend to look at things from the plaintiff perspective. So somebody that gets hit by a piece of space debris, or your plane was delayed and you had some damages because a rocket blew up and so your plane couldn't take off. Eventually there will be more plaintiff-oriented types of cases, but currently, and it's kind of a fun and exciting time to be involved in it because the framework is still being created.
Yeah. Still in the exploration.
Right. And so we look to like maritime law, which is ships, things like that, because it's sort of a corollary to space law, right? There's international waters, right? And there's different lines that mark different things. So as the space law framework is being built, in part we're relying on old maritime law and aviation law, and then new areas just of space law. So it's
because everything plays a role, right? If you're in a different territory now, it could be you might not have jurisdiction, or you can still help.
Right. That's. I was just talking with my team the other day. Yes, you can run into jurisdictional issues. You can run into international law issues, but for the most part, at the end of the day, you're still kind of boiling it down to insurance.
I see.
On these claims, how best to handle it.
That's
sort
wild.
of thing. Yeah. So, and it's kind of, and I should mention, so the rest of my team doesn't get, annoyed. In addition to our personal injury and trucking work at Law Group of Iowa, we do a lot of estate planning, a lot of small business development. So I always find it kind of interesting. One day I'm writing a will, right, for somebody, and the next day I'm talking about satellites and kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. So
you keep them busy then.
Yeah, and they all come and they go, "What are you doing? Writing books and talking about space?" And but that's you'd mentioned when we first sat down, maybe advice for young lawyers or somebody who wants to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
If a young person asks me what the most important trait for being an attorney is, my answer is always creativity.
Right.
It's not, you don't got to be the smartest guy in the whole, but you just have to be creative and you have to think and you have to come up with, I get a lot of calls from other lawyers and they'll tell me a fact pattern. Well, Chris, this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. What would you do? Because that I've tried to carve out into being creative, looking at cases creatively, and coming up with what we call theories of liability.
I see.
Right? Like, okay, well, how do we pin Amner for this thing that he did? That otherwise,
I feel guilty already.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's not just fact. In between those, you're saying that there's creativity in between the facts too. Look at cases then.
Right, and take it and something appears this way. Well, how else can I make it appear? How can I be creative? How can I mull this around? And for a guy like me, now I know plenty of lawyers who are the sit at their desk and do their, follow the book and the code, and I really wouldn't want to do that kind of work. And that's one nice thing about litigation, be it trucking or space law. You can really open things up and be creative on how you want to approach your cases and how you're going to tell your story to a jury and all that kind of thing. So,
what do you think the biggest misconception is of lawyers?
That we're stuffy.
Okay.
And boring. Honestly, you know me a little bit. There's nothing I enjoy more than getting the compliment of, well, you're not what I'd expect. Because sure, there's stuffy guys and gals out there, but for the most part, my experience, most attorneys are really approachable and it when people talk to us. We'll get that kind of, I don't want to, I'm the lawyer, I don't want to talk to that guy. Oh, come talk to me. Come to my office. Check out my museum. So, and maybe that's just me, but it is that misconception that we're all middle-aged white guys and we're stuffy and do boring law work.
So approach you. Come say hi.
Absolutely.
Come listen. Yeah, I had a great experience with you and at your office, and I would advise everybody to connect with you in any aspect that that you're doing. So because I was like, wait, this could be for like teachers to like give a whole class an assignment and say, here, what
Yes, I sent a copy of the book to one of my law school professors.
Okay,
and I told him specifically it would be an excellent trial advocacy or mock trial teaching guide because just by way of example. You're in trial and we've all heard objection, blah, 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 right? Just about every standard objection can be made is in my book. And then the lawyers working around the objections, working around different evidentiary issues and how they do it. Most people wouldn't read it with that eye for that, but if you're a lawyer or a teacher or what have you, I could come up with 1,000 quizzes that they could give students based just on that book. And the shameless plug, the easiest way to get a copy, if anyone's interested, I would go to lawgroupofiowa.com, which is my website. About halfway down on the homepage is a big red button. You can't miss it. And it says, buy the Roswell book. And that will take them right to the correct page on Amazon. So at lawgroupofiowa.com.
It's a great book. Let me ask you this about New Mexico.
Okay.
Maybe because I love New Mexico.
Right.
We go there often, and it's called the Land of Enchantment. And the more you go, you kind of start to realize like, there's something unique about this place. There's a lot of like UFO vibe or like aura around their history, the atomic bomb and Roswell. And do you have a thought about that? Like, why New Mexico? Like, New Mexico is very unique in this, like with UFO, like the connection with aliens, UFOs, government, gated areas.
That's a great question. And I think it's probably a little bit of which came first, right? The chicken or the egg. Was it Roswell kind of came first and set the stage for the culture to be more accepting?
Yeah.
Or were they already kind of out there before Roswell? And I don't know, but I'm going to say probably the culture in New Mexico with their UFO acceptance and openness really does stem from Roswell, because Roswell was the first, at least well-known, well-published, there might be some other things that I'm not familiar with, but Roswell, at least here in the United States, that was it. That was the first big deal. And so, and I've never been to Roswell, but I do know, I've looked at pictures, and they've got everything is alien named, the cafe, extraterrestrial car or whatever. So I would imagine that Roswell really set the stage for that.
I see. Yeah, it's very unique because even the baseball team is called the Isotopes.
Nice.
Which is like an ingredient to the atomic bomb. That's like their Iowa Cubs version here. Their baseball team of that league is the Isotopes.
I didn't know that, and I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to. That's the Isotopes is also the name of the baseball team on The Simpsons.
Yes. So they did a contest. They were gonna name the team, and they did a whole contest, and the Isotopes were voted as to be the name, so that's what they named.
So there's a bunch of Simpsons fans going, that'll be hilarious.
And it's very unique state. There's another place called Consequences. I think it's Love and Consequences in Mexico.
Which I've heard of, never been.
And I guess on a TV show a long time ago, they made they said if you participate, we'll name your town or something. It was so interesting. If your town wins, we got to name your town. And the town participated in this TV show, and then it was called, I think it's Love and Consequences. That's the name of the town.
That's how it got the name?
Yeah, through a TV show contest.
Weird.
Yeah, yeah. So, very interesting book.
Thank you.
You're a very interesting person. We've been trying to connect ever since we met. It just, our schedules, we couldn't, you text me, and then months later I was like, did you text me? Then I texted you. And
so it's great to be here.
Yeah, finally. I'm glad that we actually made it happen. There's so much more that I would love to ask you as an expert in law and all that stuff. So maybe we'll do this again on another topic. And because as you mentioned earlier, the law and the structure of this country is kind of being tested, right?
It certainly is.
And the pillars of this country are being tested. You mentioned ignoring a court order, that's setting a standard for not necessarily a good path.
Right. Where does it stop?
Right. So thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. TheLawGroupOfIowa.com.
Yes, sir.
Is where they can connect with you.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for having me, Amner. This was great.
Yeah, this was awesome. And thank you again. And we'll have to do it again.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. And we'll see everybody next time.